President Obama's proposed nuclear agreement with Iran has been on the table for months. Congress is deeply divided along party lines whether to lift sanctions on the country and pursue nuclear energy. Republicans say allowing Iran access to nuclear energy could lead to a nuclear arms race in the region. Democrats say lifting sanctions could help the Iranian middle class thrive and support international relations in the Middle East. This discussion is a hot topic in Washington, D.C., and as Sophia Salabi reports, various groups in Indiana are also weighing in, trying to persuade Indiana's congressional representatives of their views on the deal.
David Keppel has been hard at work rallying support in southern Indiana for the United States nuclear deal with Iran since its announcement earlier this summer.
Well, as we saw the negotiations getting closer, we realized that this would hinge on Congress. And we have worked very hard to show Senator Joe Donnelly and Senator Dan Coates and Congressman Todd Young that there's strong grassroots support for the deal.
Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly announced his support of the deal in August, but Republican Senator Dan Coates and all of Indiana's Republican representatives in Congress are firmly against the deal. One of their primary concerns is that the agreement is not enough to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
I think there'll be long-term negative consequences for this, and I'm very, very concerned about an arms race in the Middle East now that will take place that could lead to a nuclear Armageddon. We could have done much better. We could have negotiated much more. We had the leverage. We gave it away in a desperate attempt to please Iran, and they're cheering in the streets of Tehran. And still calling death to America and calling us the great Satan. So I don't think that turns out to be the deal we should have struck.
Even though the deal sets up an in-depth inspection process to ensure Iran doesn't cheat on the deal, many still have concerns that the money freed up from the end of sanctions will go to terrorist organizations in the region.
They've stuffed out every attempt at liberalization. So I think we're dealing with a rogue nation here, and we've just given them power and money, well over $100 billion now, to rebuild themselves, and they'll be a much wealthier, much more capable nation in the future with disruption of everything in the Middle East and jeopardizing not just Israel but many of their neighbors.
Supporters of the agreement are confident the deal is a diplomatic solution strong enough to prevent Iran from enriching the needed amount of uranium to make a nuclear weapon, at least until the agreement's expiration date in 15 years.
Iran is a state that understands its interests and that acts rationally.
Faisal Istrabadi, founding director of Indiana University's Center for the Study of the Middle East, addressed critics' concerns during a recent panel discussion at IU.
Of course, Iran can cheat, but hopefully and presumably the technology for detecting that cheating will improve over the 10 to 15 years. And in the meantime, it controls Iran's nuclear program at least over the life of the agreement.
The Iran deal has been voted down by the House, and it's being deliberated in the Senate, but a disapproval from Congress doesn't mean an end for the agreement. A veto by President Obama, supported by enough votes, would let the deal go through. As long as Congress has the issues in front of them, David Keppel says he'll continue to make the case for diplomacy from Bloomington.
I think that deals are strong when they're in both countries' interests. This deal is strongly in Iran's interest, and it's in our interest, and they're not conflicting.
For Indiana News Desk, I'm Sophia Salabi.
And Lee Hamilton joins us now, the Director, Center on Congress, to continue this discussion. Can you explain to us a little bit more about what just happened in Congress to let this go through? And then along with that, what's this process been like for lawmakers?
Well, it's been a tough go for lawmakers. They've been debating it for 60 days or so. Very intense pressure on all of them, both for and against. A lot of money spent to favor it, a lot of money spent against it. This is a big deal. This is a big vote for the lawmakers. That decision's been made, and the agreement is going to go forward. So the real question now is what happens after the agreement goes into effect, and are we going to oversee robustly the implementation of the agreement?
What's that process of implementation?
Well, we saw in the headlines this morning that the president appointed a so-called czar from the executive branch to look over implementation. I'm skeptical of the word czar in the American government, but we use it a lot. But I'm glad the president did. It's the right step. The Congress has to do the same thing. Now, the Congress has been debating whether to accept the agreement or not. That's a proper debate. But what they have not done is set up a mechanism to provide oversight so that you get compliance with this very complicated agreement. I hope they will do that within the next few days.
So what happens at the end of these next 15 years? Will Iran be able to get a nuclear weapon at that point, or what will lawmakers have to do?
This is a limited agreement in time. I think for 15 years it is the best possible way to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And the critics seem to accept that, incidentally, and they worry about the time after the 15 or maybe 20-year period. They're correct to worry about that. So we have to keep our eyes and ears open and be prepared for what comes. But the immediate problem is to see that Iran complies with the agreement, that there are strong enforcement procedures. If they do comply, fine, they won't develop a bomb. If they do not comply, then there have been no limitations on our actions, what actions we can take. So we're not risking anything here by this agreement.
Would you call this a historic moment? And if so, how big a deal is this to us?
It's a big deal. This is the most important agreement, I think, for the Obama administration, certainly towards the end of his presidency. There's a lot at stake here. This is a tumultuous region of the world. You can't solve all the problems there. This agreement doesn't solve all the problems, but it does solve the immediate, most serious problem, the dash of Iran towards a nuclear weapon. And therefore, it deserves our support, provided they comply, and we have to be vigilant on that point.
And I can tell at that panel they had overflow capacity crowds, so big interest. Thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice to be with you, Joe. Okay.